Once upon a time, there lived an old king. He was once known for his good looks, but no longer he was as young and as handsome as he once was. And King knew it, and he did not like it. And so disgusted he became by his own reflection that he stopped smiling and became miserable. And the more miserable the king became, the more obsessed he became about finding the elixir of youth. And one day he heard his servants speak of an old woman that might know just that. And so shortly after, the king and his procession headed towards the woods to find the old woman. And soon they came across a small little hut deep within the dark forest. The hut was old and slightly tilted to the right side. It screeched every time a gust of wind came across it. Lichen and moss covered the wooden walls, and the windows were dark with cobwebs and birds' nests scattered on the window sills. The king jumped off his horse and knocked on the door, and an old woman appeared. Her small, piercing yellow eyes stared right at the king, and he shivered. "Stop it, old hag," he said. "I come here, for I seek the elixir of youth." The old woman laughed, a laughter that sounded like old trees creaking in the wind. "Everyone desires an elixir of youth," she said, "but not everyone is willing to pay the price it takes to acquire it." The king looked into her face. She herself must have been at least 100 years old. There was not a single smooth surface on her face. Wrinkles and crevasses, pimples and dimples. Her face looked like the land around her hut, uneven, wild and raw. "I suppose you know little of that elixir," the king said, unable to hide his disgust in her face. She smiled and stared back at him. "I will tell you where to find an elixir of youth, but you must bet a life on it. That is the price. Take it or leave it." She waved her hand in the air as she finished her words, and a scroll fell on the floor, appearing from the thin air. She turned around and closed the door behind her. The king clicked his fingers and his servants ran up and picked it up. They opened it and he could see that that was a map. He jumped back on the horse and the procession moved forward. The path in front of them was wide open, with the bright sun shining and the gentle breeze blowing into their faces. And the king took a deep breath in and smirked. This is going to be an easy journey. But as soon as he thought it, suddenly the sky became darker, the wind picked up, and the trees around them started to bend. "Move forward," the king commanded. "I am the mighty king of this land. I will not be beaten by the winds." And as they moved forward, the sky broke into the thunderous thunder, and the lightning started to strike all around him and his servants. And the horses cried out in the dark, and some of them galloped away in fear for their lives, carrying servants with them who were hanging on for their dear life. "Return, I command, return," the king shouted. But his voice was merely a whisper, lost in the background of thunder. And And so it was him and only a couple of other servants left. And soon they passed the thunder and the storm, and just as they exited it, they found themselves at the foot of a mountain. The old king looked at the map, and he could see that the journey lay through the mountain. And for a while the journey was pleasant. There was beautiful scenery around them, a whisper in creeks and rolling sound of the water. The rocks were soft and warm to the touch, holding the memory of the day sun. "We must rest," said the servants to the king. "The horses are tired, and so are we. It was a battle to move through the storm." The king looked displeased, but at the end of the day he was tired too. He clicked his fingers, commanding his servants to come forward and take him off the horse. And one of them jumped down, kneeling, putting his back for the king to step on. And the servant sighted, feeling the weight on his shoulders. The other servants quickly made a tent and lay down carpets for the king to rest on. And just as he lay down on the soft carpets, drinking the sweet cold water, his remaining servants came up to him. "Sire," they said, "this is a sacred mountain, and one must give before one takes. It is a custom of a sacred place." "Nonsense," said the king. "This land is mine. It's in my kingdom, and I command what is sacred. And here I am the sacred one." He took a big gulp of sweet waters, and just as he did, they all heard the screeching from far above, and as they looked up, they noticed that the black spots were coming towards them, and soon they could see that those were hawks plummeting down towards king and his servants. Afraid and shouting, they all tried to run into the tent, but the king stood in front of this, and he pushed his servants outside of the tent. The hawks descended, and with their sharp claws they ripped into the flesh of the servants, ripping some apart and picking the others and taking them away. And only one of the servants managed to hide. He found shelter under an old tree, and as he lay there in the roots of the trees, he was praying for his life, with tears rolling down his eyes. "Please," he whispered. And that whisper was so pure that it came straight from his heart, from his longing for his wife and children, and for once again to see them and embrace them in his arms. And the mountain could hear it. And so the hawks flew away, leaving him behind, scared but alive. King has noticed the disappearance of hawks too, so he opened the tent and in horror realized that nobody was left behind. "Sire, are you okay?" He heard the voice of his servant. "Oh, what a relief," he said. "You are the lucky one, for you left to tend to the needs of your king. Quick now, I see that there is a horse that is hiding in the bushes. Go fetch it, and we carry on towards the source of all youth." "But sire, we must return. We have lost everyone. What if worse is yet to come? What will we do? Just the two of us in the face of it." "Fear not," said the king. "Nothing has happened to me so far, and nothing will." The servant sighed. He could not disobey his king, and so he fetched the horse, and the two of them moved forward. Soon they came to the cave. That was the end point on the map, and the king trembled with excitement, and so excited he was that he jumped off the horse at once. His servant humbly lowered his gaze. He was worried that that would be the end of him. And so 2 of them made it in. They in the dark, touching the walls of the cave, the sharp rock, the moss, and the dripping water. They moved forward, step by step, stumbling, sometimes falling, sometimes sliding, and soon enough, the darkness started to fill in with radiance. A light was coming from somewhere, and the most beautiful sound, a haunting, delightful song that sounded like youthfulness and vigor and vivacity itself. "Oh," said the old king, "I can feel it." And he ran towards it eagerly, with his servant following him. And soon the 2 entered the opening. As they entered, a fire started to grow. Brighter and brighter it became, more radiant and more furious. It was the most beautiful thing that either of them saw in their life. And the servant gasped, bowing to it. And the king stretched his arms, knowing that that must be the elixir of life. And as he reached towards it, he suddenly stopped. The old king remembered the words of the old woman. A life must be given. He drew his hands back to himself. He thought. Perhaps I will die if I take it. And she said a life, not my life. He looked to the side where his servant stood. "Go and fetch me the fire," the old king said. The words reflected terror in the young man's eyes. He knew that would be the end of him. He could feel the potency of that fire. It was burning so bright that he would never withstand its light. Tears were dropping from his eyes as he was remembering his family, his elderly parents, and his village, all those that he loved so dearly. He folded his hands and threw them up in the air and whispered, "Please take care of them, and please forgive me for all the wrongdoings." And he stepped into the fire. But to his surprise, he did not die. He suddenly felt the strength arrive into his body. The energy run through his bones, and he felt himself become taller and bigger. He took a deep breath in, with his lungs expanding and his heart beating like a drum. And a song came, so loud and vibrant and buoyant that the walls shook. And as he sang, the fire became more contained, and soon it was all in him. He was the one who was glowing like a golden chalice. He looked around himself and could not believe the beauty of the cave. The crystals that were shining from everywhere, the glimpses of water, and a soft sound of its dripping. He could hear the whispers of the mountain and the beating of his own heart. It all sounded like one song, sung beautifully in harmony. Return and take care of those that you love. He heard the voice of the old woman rise from within his heart, and he bowed in recognition of that simple instruction that felt true to him. The young man found his way out. He embraced the sun and the sky and the green earth that he saw upon his return from the underworld. And there, right by the side, stood his horse. He was too stronger and brighter, a fine horse to carry a fine man. He jumped on the horse and found his way back to his village and his people and his family. And soon the word about his wisdom and strength stretched across the land, and people came to him asking to be their king. And he became the finest king there ever was, the one that always knew how to honor the mountains. And over time, he became known as the king that brought life back to the kingdom. And as for Old King, and it is believed that he still lies there, covered in moss and dripping water, older than old, and yet eternal in his own way.